Alright, so we're back, and it's been about almost 2 weeks since we were able to wash it. With spring in Wisconsin, we needed at least 2 good drying days to let it dry out, and it rained for about every other day for about 2 weeks straight. Around the 2 week time, we tell people usually it's a good idea just to get back into wash your deck, because as you can see, there's been debris and other things that have flown on there, pollen and dust, but since this is in my house, I didn't have a chance to get back. We're just going to sweep it off first, and then the next step is to sand the deck. Sanding the deck, the purpose of that is to remove any gray wood. Gray wood is damaged wood cells, so you remove the gray wood so it can soak into the fresh new wood, and any damaged wood fibers from the cleaning process. Those are kind of usually little fuzzies, wood fuzzies, so removing the dead wood, the damaged wood, having the stain soak into good wood. We're also going to use 80 grit or coarser sandpaper, 80 or lower in number. That's going to also open up the pores of the wood so the stain can soak in further. Anything finer, 120, 180, 220, it actually closes the pores off so the stain can't soak in as well. So removing the dead, decayed wood, damaged wood, opening up the pores of the stain so the wood can soak in better. What we have here is something that we rent out. It's a floor sander. It's like pushing a big, heavy shopping cart. I'm actually going to probably either use 20 grit or 36 grit sandpaper, because it's just going to remove the top layer easier, and it's going to open up the pores so it'll soak in better. This will probably take about half an hour to do the whole deck. It beats being on your hands and knees for a couple hours sanding it, and then still having to come back and stain. So as you can see, we usually like to sand right before we stain. We don't want to have it sanded and then come back the next day, and let's say you get a shower in the middle of the night. When the pores all ready to accept stain, water, rain, dew is going to soak into those open pores and they won't take as much stain. So we like to advise people to sand and stain as soon close together as possible. So next we're going to take a little break and sand this deck, and I'll check back with you. Just got most of the deck sanded with the sander. You see there's some areas you couldn't get underneath the benches, the uprights obviously you can't get, but so we'll come back and use a hand sander or sand it by hand just to open up the pores of the wood. While I was doing it, I thought about people. A lot of times they ask, should you sand first and then clean it, or should you clean it and sand first? So the reason why we clean first, and the reason why you do that, is you remove the dirt, the grease, the grime, remove as much dirt as you can, and then you sand it to open up the pores. If you sand it first, you could be pushing the dirt, the mold, the mildew deeper into the wood, and be harder to remove it. So now, once we get sanded, we're gonna brush off all the loose sand, then it'll be time to stain. So we're just gonna finish up with a little bit of sanding, and I'll explain why we're brushing our stain on, and gonna try to do it out of the sun and other things, but catch up with you. So we just finished sanding and brushing off the deck. Making sure to remove all the sawdust is very important. Last summer we had somebody who rented the sander, bought our stain, and was having little flakes peeling right up, and they brought in the chip, and you could see all these little pieces of wood fibers that were stuck to the back. It said, well, how'd you sand it? I can still see the wood on the back. Well, he didn't remove the sawdust, and it was just like a fine layer of dust film, so the stain couldn't soak into the wood. The other thing is, we use a random oscillating sander. That one just vibrates like crazy. It just vibrates on the surface, it moves, it won't stay in the same spot. There's the orbital sanders, which can put swirls in your wood, or the belt sanders, which you can wear down if you leave it in one spot too long, can wear it down too much. On a side note, the Verathane square buff floor sander that we're using, it was discontinued, and so if anyone knows we can get a replacement one like it, leave it in the comment section below, or even replacement parts. Let us know if you found anything to help find extra spare parts. It is a great machine we've had for years. So there's many things that make the stain work, but you see the first thing we did was make sure it was dry enough. If the wood is too wet, too saturated with rainwater, dew from the cleaning. If the wood is too wet with water, well, there's no room for the stain to soak in. If it can't soak in, it'll set on the surface and it's more likely to peel. The other thing is sanding. Sanding with 80 grit or coarser sandpaper moves the dead, decayed wood, opens up the pores so it can soak in better. The other thing is not applying the stain when it's in direct sunlight. So you can see this gets afternoon sun, but we're starting to get some sunlight over here. A way of testing if it's too hot to stain, if you touch the wood and it's hotter than your hand, then it's too hot to stain. So the sun has just started to kind of cook this area, it's starting to warm up, so that's going to be the area we hit first, just so we can get that stained and moved on, so then we can do the shaded parts. The other thing that you'll see is we're going to be brushing it on. Brushing, you put the heaviest coat on, you brush it into all the cracks, crevices, nooks. Roller, right where you first put the roller, it's nice and heavy, and then you roll it out. The rolled out area looks okay, but it's thinner in those areas. The sun wears it down evenly, and the thinner areas are going to wear first, the whole deck's going to look warm. Now it's kind of become popular, these staining pads. Same thing, the staining pad just brushes a light coat onto the surface. Stainer brushes, like we have, are just a ton of bristles meant to hold oil-based stains. You don't need to cut in around windows or anything, you just want to hold stain. The more it holds, the faster it'll get it done. What's also nice is you can put extension broom handles so you can stand up and do it, but it just holds so much stain and brushes it in, so that's what kind of seems you get an extra year out of it. Last thing people ask about is spraying. What we figure is inside. When you spray an inside of a house, you lose about 10% in overspray, just where the mist doesn't land where it's supposed to. Outside with any breeze, you could lose another 10%. So 20% at least, meaning if you buy 5 gallons, only 4 gallons is going to actually make it onto the surface. Now some areas may have too much, some areas may not have enough, so then you still would have to come back and back brush it in. So you're spraying and brushing, you might as well just brush to start with. The stain that we picked, or that we're using, which we'll do a whole nother video about, is the lumberjacket, and specifically the natural color. We'll have a whole separate video about why it makes this different, why we're using this one, and why it's the preferred way now that we sell. But we're going to brush this on, do it out of the sun, and then the last thing is dry time. In Wisconsin, as you can see, we can hardly get 2 days in a row without rain in the spring, let alone they want 2 days of drying after cleaning and raining, and 2 days after you apply the stain to make sure that it doesn't get rained on. Well, it's unrealistic in Wisconsin. What's more important is that the wood is dry when you stain it. If it's too wet, it can't soak in, it can peel. Let's say we do it today, and I think actually tomorrow there's supposed to be like a 30% chance of rain. If it rains tomorrow, well, that's not the best thing, but this is an oil-based stain. And same thing when we talk about lumberjack, we'll talk about oil versus water-based stains. This is an oil-based stain. So you got your oil stain and your rainwater. The oil and water will stay separated. So eventually the sun will cook that rainwater back out if it gets into the film. It may leave it hazy in some areas, or maybe if it's a hard driving rain, may pit it, but you can always fix that up. If the wood is too wet because it just got rained on, then it's going to peel. Now you got to sand it, start over. So we're not going to make you watch us stain this whole deck, but we'll make sure to check back in afterwards so you can look to see the before and after of putting down this translucent wood toner stain. So, a couple things. I told you weren't going to make me watch, but I'm going to talk to you while I do this. So you can see I'm going the length of the boards. What you want to do is you want to go stain with the grain. So I usually do about 3 boards at a time, and I put on almost as heavy of a coat as I can. You know, I don't want it pooling wet, but I also don't want to stretch it thin. So if you kind of have some wet areas, you just brush those out. You can kind of come back and even hit some areas that you haven't seen, but you brush with the grain. So what also happens is while you brush with the grain, so you don't see brush strokes, you push it into the cracks better. The same thing with the sanding. You might have noticed I did as well as I could with that big thing to sand with the grain. Same thing, put the scratches and stuff if there are some with the grain so it's not as noticeable. The other thing that a lot of people ask about is how do you get in between the cracks of the deck boards? Well, the stainer brush is going to get down there 1/4 inch, maybe 1/2 inch, but it's not going to go all the way through. So if you get on your hands and knees and you look, you're going to be able to see just the top half of the board. If any neighbors or people want to come over and get on their hands and knees and look at it, they'll notice it, but most times, staining from a distance, it looks fine. The other thing that I noticed while doing it, which I haven't talked about, is the gap in between the boards. The closer it is to the ground, the wider the gap you want. The reasoning for this is same thing. We'll talk more about the lumberjacket stain, but penetrating stains in general. But this allows the moisture to pass in and out. But if you're in Wisconsin, you got the big snow belts or the big rainfalls, and the sun starts trying to cook the rain out or the moisture out of the ground. If it's too tight together, the moisture is going to get trapped in the wood. The other thing is the gaps in the wood are also going to allow the wood to expand and contract. Too close together, they're going to start to warp and cup, and cupping is where water is going to sit, and then it'll more likely to peel. So these guys probably have at least a 1/4 inch gap in there, which I'd say is about the minimum amount, given how close they are to the ground. But make sure whoever builds your deck puts enough space, especially close you are to the ground, for breathability. So we just finished up staining the deck. You can see it's freshly done, still wet. It's going to dry in to be a nice flat finish, and we'll talk more in the video about penetrating stains and pluses and minuses on it. But I think people ask about how long should they stay off of it. You can dry as a touch in about 3 to 4 hours, maybe lightly walking on it with some socks or barefoot, but obviously the longer you can stay off of it, the better. They usually want at least 24 hours to 48 of heavy foot traffic, walking in and out with shoes on, things like that, and usually at least a week before putting the furniture and things back on, because they'll scratch up very easy, or they may tack together. So different things to help it dry, from kind of most important to least important. First one is humidity. If you got 100% humidity, there's nowhere for the moisture to escape to, so it's just going to sit there and stay wet for the longest amount of time. The other thing is temperature. The closer it gets to freezing, the longer it'll take to dry. So a lot of times in fall, we'll get a lot of calls about taking a week for just a stain to dry. It should take a day to 2. The reason is you have to look at the lows at night. The closer the lows at night are to freezing, it's just not going to dry at night. And then you have dew and things sitting on it that has to cook off first before it dries. So it could easily take a week to do it. The other thing is sunlight. Now that we're done, the sun cooking the deck is actually going to help it dry better and faster. You just can't apply the stain when the deck is too hot to stain, too hot to touch to stain. And the other thing is airflow. So you got a nice breezy day, airflow on there. Sometimes people putting box fans, things like that to make it dry faster. That's going to help once it's applied. The last thing is, people always ask, when is it time to redo it? Well, obviously there's the visual test when it starts to look worn and dry. But if you remember in the first film, that splash test where we took up some water and we dumped it on, if it soaks in within 30 seconds or so, then it's ready to be stained again. If it still is beating up like it is supposed to be on the TV on there, then it's too soon to stain. The top coat's going to rebeat, and it's only going to be, this product is only a 1-coat application. I think that's it. Thank you for watching.